The Nissan GTR is the quintessential Japanese sports car, having been around for close to 40 years and having countless racing victories and even movie appearances. However, the R35, which is the current generation of the Nissan GTR, is nearing 20 years of age, and it has been in production for longer than all of the three previous generations of GTR combined. And that means that there are people both inside the auto industry and performance car enthusiasts that are anxiously waiting for Nissan to release news on the R35 successor. And when the latest version of the R35 came out at the Tokyo Auto Salon a few weeks ago, many were very disappointed in the direction that Nissan went. In order to understand Nissan's choices and their relationship with this latest GTR, first we must take a trip back and understand where the R35 and the previous generations of GTR came from. The GTR was first made by Nissan in 1969 and was produced for a few years before being discontinued, only for Nissan to start making it again in 1989. And the R32 GTR, which was that first GTR that they made after the long break, was pretty much a race car homologated for the street. And what Nissan intended to do with it was use it in touring car racing in Japan and abroad. And they did that very well with it, winning pretty much every race in Japan over a span of 2 or 3 years. And it was so good that it was even banned from Australian touring car racing. And after the success of the R32, the R33 is believed by many to be the lesser of the GTRs compared to the R32 and the R34, but it has still enjoyed a massive amount of success in the almost 30 years that it's been around. And after the R33, the R34 came out, and that was Nissan's kind of magnum opus of the GTR line, at least in the 90s. And those cars have gone on to see prices well into the $300,000 range. And I think that brings up the interesting point about these older GTRs, is that they're really becoming collector cars in much the same way that a lot of the early 20s and 30s, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, those types of cars became collector cars, and then later on the Camaros, Mustangs, and Chargers of the 60s and 70s became collector cars. And these Skylines and Supras and RX-7s as well have become kind of the genre-defining car of an era for a lot of people that came of age in the 90s and wanted these cars as children, but now have the means to purchase them. And I think the clearest example of this is the Nissan 400R that sold, I think about a year ago maybe, for $3 million. And the 400R is the most exclusive, I think. I don't know if that's really quite the right word, but it is a Nismo variant of the R33 GTR that has a lot of special parts on it and is really based in a lot of like race car technology from the touring cars, I think. And this kind of shows how Nissan is noticing the hype behind the GTR, and they want to really stretch it out as much as possible because they know that there have never been more eyes on this particular lineup of car than there are now. And I think that with the R35, it has almost its own cult fan base. And the R35, compared to all the other GTRs, I would say is way faster in stock form, but also you can modify it for it to have 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower if you so desire with the stock engine or a billet version of that engine. And I think that this performance potential has really given it an edge over a lot of the other competitors, like the Porsche 911, which has a similar amount of potential, but it isn't as well documented and there haven't been nearly as many that have reached the level that a lot of the fastest GTRs have. And I think that it's important to understand the hype behind the GTR and what might influence Nissan to keep this current GTR around as long as they have. And I think that the reason they are keeping the GTR in its current form around for at least another few years really boils down to just the changing climate in the auto industry to begin with. And a lot of people are moving towards electric or hybrid performance cars, with the new Corvette E-Ray being the most notable example of a major auto manufacturer taking their, I guess, most popular performance car and changing it up in a way that I think is pretty cool, but a lot of people might not agree with. And the thing for Nissan is, if they do go the Corvette E-Ray, I guess, hybrid route, I don't think they will develop just straight up gas-powered GTR for the next generation. It's all going to be either hybrid or electric. Whereas this current Corvette, if the E-Ray doesn't sell, they've still got the Z06 and the Stingray to fall back on. And if people don't want to buy an E-Ray, they could buy a Stingray or a Z06. And I think that that's the tricky part for Nissan, is timing when they get rid of this current GTR, which people really love, but also people are getting sick of. And they're starting to really badger Nissan about, hey, when are you going to bring this new car out? But I don't think a lot of people realize that this current GTR will probably be the last true internal combustion GTR that Nissan produces. And I think that while I feel like a lot of people will view that as a real travesty, and I think it will diminish the spirit of the GTR a little bit, but then again, the GTR's kind of core spirit has always been being on the bleeding edge of technology. Like when the R32 first debuted, it had all-wheel drive, which was very rare outside of a few German cars at the time, and it kind of made it more popular amongst sports cars. And I think that if they integrate like hybrid electric technology properly in the next one, they could maybe even do the same thing to a certain extent, even though hybrid supercars are very common nowadays, with just about every supercar manufacturer making one or having plans to make one in the near future. And I think that really showcases maybe what Nissan's train of thought is with the next GTR, and with them releasing another version that isn't on paper very much different from the current one that they're making. And I think that they're just buying time until they're able to release a drastically new and different version of the GTR to the public and hopefully get a good response. But it'll be interesting to see how the car changes over the next few years, and if they do end up making another one or just let it die out, which would be really unfortunate, and I feel like it'd be a bit of a missed opportunity for Nissan.